Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Carlson. I'm the marketing coordinator here at Advisicon, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar. Here at Advisicon, we're a group of authors, teachers, consultants, and technologists offering training in the Microsoft technologies such as Project, Office 365, Power BI, Visio, and SharePoint, as well as project management and methodology. With attending any of our training sessions, we offer PDUs as we are a registered education provider with the Project Management Institute. And at the close of today's session, I will give some instructions on how you can claim your PDUs and how to get in contact with us for any questions you may have. Before we get started, we'll go over a few things so you know how to participate in today's event. If you review the control panel, that should be on the top right of your screen. The audience is muted during this session, so in order to ask a question, you will need to submit them in the questions window of this control panel. This webinar will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. For those of you who could not attend today's session live, please note that any of your questions or comments submitted will not be displayed in the recording, nor will any of your personal information be shared. And it's now my pleasure to introduce our instructors for today, Tim Runcie and Wesley Dameron. So without further ado, I'll hand this over to them and we can get started.
Fantastic. Thanks, Amanda. You know what's funny is that I shaved off my beard today, so Wesley and I would totally look like the same. We just kind of blur together if we hadn't. But welcome, everyone, to Webinar Wednesday. Very happy to have you here. For some of you dealing with the cold of the winter, you know, hey, it's a beautiful sunny weather day up here. I'm sure the polar vortex is going to make rounds here. But today's topics is going to be very helpful, especially as we dig into understanding about generational differences and really understanding how to manage and motivate your teams. So for those of you that know me, certainly I'm the president founder of Advisicon, love to look at both technology, but we also know that projects don't get done without people. And that is so important, is to never forget about the methodology side, the people side of what we do. I'm super excited today to introduce a friend and a colleague and a speaker as well, Wesley Dameron, who is going to be presenting a little bit about what his company does and how that fits well in terms of understanding what we can do to support teams or even personal and professional productivity. So Wesley, why don't you just introduce yourself, tell them a little about what your company is, some of what you've done, and a little bit of why you're here today.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm glad to be a part of this, and it's good to see your smiling face here this morning. So, Wesley Dameron with JinDev, and our focus is really guiding leaders to greater influence with a young generation of workers. And there's a lot of work to be done around that, but it's a huge need for businesses. And we saw this as a problem as I talked to other owners, as we talked together, Tim, and we just see that this is a big deal for business leaders as they've got young adults in their organizations, and just how to deal with the differences in their value system.
So Wesley, your company focuses not just in consulting with organizations on how to improve, but also the actual teaching and training. And I think you've got some online videos, online tutorials, and training components. So how are you seeing that need, especially looking at the younger generation, of the digital content? Is that something that's being consumed rather readily, or what's the approach there?
Yeah, great question. So I think what we've seen is, by the time young adults or teenagers are in middle school and high school, I mean, they're consuming video content with devices in their hands nonstop. So, but really, it's moved beyond that. So our primary target is the bosses, the leaders, senior leadership, and we find that they consequently love consuming video content as well. So digital trainings are very useful. They're accessible. This on-demand training, it's incredibly powerful across all platforms and many generations. So my grandma's on Facebook nonstop.
Well, hence, we do record these videos. We will put them up on YouTube. We found that some of the best vehicles for transferring knowledge, in many cases, if you can't be there in person, certainly getting on demand or at least video content is helpful. So let's kind of drill into our topic today. I mean, one of the things that we're looking at in terms of understanding how do you manage your teams, how do you work with your colleagues, both either older or younger, is really understanding what is the, what we'll call the problem statement of how to solve some of the generational divide or conversational pieces. Now, whether you're running a project team or you're running a development or a technical team or working with customers, is that this is an element that you definitely need to factor in place. So today we're going to go into what we call the millennial employee problems, and not so necessarily it's a problem. Sometimes it's a generational understanding issue where maybe people just aren't understanding how to communicate in that dialect or to work with it, as long as we have some tips, tricks, and things to manage from that. The key is there's some amazing value, and one of the things that I love about some of our younger staff at our company is that they have the energy of 1,000 suns. They need to be channeled and engaged, and so I think this is something great for both senior resources or business leaders, is how to maximize that potential. And again, what tools can you apply? Whether it's a team member or you're a project manager or a team manager, is what are the tools that we actually can work with to help make sure we improve that. And then we'll drill into a little bit of what we call communication breakdown, some of the key selection points, and then how we also get into solution steps to make sure that those work well. And then, of course, we'll have a little bit of time at the end if hopefully Wesley and I don't just wax philosophical forever, and we'll do a little audience Q&A. So with that, Wesley, why don't we just kick it off here and talk about how to empower your team to success by bridging generational gaps.
Yeah, well, thank you. You know, I kind of get a kick out of your intro, because a lot of the mentality from leadership is, gosh, these are massive obstacles we're dealing with. I like to reframe those millennial obstacles as opportunities. Thanks. So you'll know that you're in the right place today if either you have experienced some of these common sentiments, or you've got a boss that has expressed some of these things. So on this, I built a slide deck out with you. What's interesting about this, these are real quotes from my peers, other business owners. We have students, followers, my clients, and some of the things that they're saying are down below. So it's too much of a hassle.
Harsh.
Yeah, a little harsh, but when you ask people in private, like, this is truly the mentality of a lot of leaders. It's interesting though, and I will point out, because you can read these, but when young adults get in positions of leadership, we're actually finding that they're facing the same exact opportunities as senior leaders. So yeah, so I'd rather retire than hire young adults. Obviously the obstacles, like, I don't have time. No, I really don't have time to deal with these young adults. Okay, I got a little time, but it's still not worth it. And then finally, you know what? Millennials are just the same as other generations. They're just kids being kids. And that's called life cycle effects. But those are real quotes, and those are real problems, because they do prevent us from moving forward. What is your experience in this? Like, have you heard other business owners saying things like this?
You know, what's interesting is that there's different creative minds, and so sometimes I talk to some of my staff. I go, "You remind me when I was 25 years old, or when I was an 18 or 19-year-old. You know, that I just had all this energy and ambition." And some of it is just, you know, will somebody take me seriously? And I remember used to just saying, how do I dress? How do I make sure that somebody isn't just overlooking me because of my age? And regardless of whether I'm in the Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, or if I'm in the end of the baby boomer or the beginning of the baby boomer era, is that sometimes you find that as a leadership team, people kind of lose and don't necessarily, they lose touch with the audience that they're working with, or at least the stakeholders or the team members. And it's something that we have to take into consideration, especially as we look as the world turns. There's more and more people of different generational divides working in our organizations or working with our projects.
And the truth is that right or wrong, those are the mentalities. And exactly what you're saying too, is these are the problems that are real issues with the companies. In fact, the biggest issues companies have are around personnel. So this hits the bottom of it. So why are we seeing this? And I feel, look, you really have a difference in value system. And the best metaphor that I like to use is, think about, and I usually do this exercise with people that are Gen Xers and above, but think about when you were 15 and 16. Now, I can imagine that when you turned 16, there was nothing more than you wanted than to drive a car, to get your driver's license, right? I mean, I can assume with you, let me just guess, Tim, you wanted to drive, you were driving when you were 15, weren't you?
I was, but I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, I knew it. See, and that was a different heck. Well, I grew up on the. Don't tell anyone. I grew up in the farms of Arkansas, and we were driving in the fields out of necessity. Like, you go do this chore, et cetera, but take the truck. So, but the difference is there's bigger difference now. We have so many young adults with the urbanization of the U.S. especially. We don't need cars. I mean, we can Uber. It's more fun to Uber anyway. A friend can pick us up. And by the way, doing your driver's test, paying for the classes, all that's a hassle. That's a big hassle to get your driver's license. So why even do it? And for adults, you're thinking, older adults, how could you not want to drive your own car? It represents freedom, away from your parents, all that. But young adults these days, they're not. They have the freedom in their device on their hands. And essentially their value system has changed. They don't value that experience as much. So I like to use that metaphor, and I think it really resonates with a lot of senior leaders, because what's happening is, in the end, the value system, thanks for changing the slide, is that traditional goals were based on somewhat Maslow's hierarchy, right? And this is kind of the meat and potatoes of why it's so important. Traditionally, we're used to doing things in order. We take care of our physiological needs. We need shelter. We need food. And then next, we need safety. And so, for example, when you have young adults in millennials that are known to go to school longer, get their master's degree, you have them sacrificing this safety element. Yeah, right.
I'm sure for those of you who are not seeing the video on the recording, I'm holding up my cell phone, right? The Wi-Fi. Oh, you hear that everywhere all the time. Go ahead, Wesley.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wi-Fi is more important than all of Maslow's needs. Let me say. Ask put a poll in this webinar and get a vote on that. But back to my point, I mean, we're seeing what millennials are doing. They're inverting their needs. So they're taking things like, oh, I need to go to college. And yeah, college is important. Education is important. But this self-actualization of being in college and seeing themselves in college, and that image crafting and saying, I want other people to see me as an academic, and that college is just what you do. They're valuing things above the basic things like safety, like financial safety, by not taking on a ton of student debt. Does that make sense here? How their value, their motivations, behaviors, and preferences can become inverted, and it feels a lot different than what we've had in the past, especially to senior leaders. They don't know how to rectify that in their mind. How the needs of self-actualization and fitting in and self-esteem have become supplanted the physiological needs like safety and health and having a home and security. So that's why. That's kind of interesting, and that's how I explain how different generations are.
And I think that's important, because whether you're hiring a team or you're managing a team, is that the motivational pieces are very different. And so if we're approaching it with maybe what I call an old school approach, is that you may be completely missing the mark. And so as certainly being a business owner and looking at what programs do we have to offer our staff, how do we be competitive in the marketplace, or if I'm running a project team, what do I do to motivate our team? It isn't necessarily all the things that we've done over the last 10, 15, 20 years. It's something that's certainly more innovative and creative, and you definitely need to take stock in that.
Yeah, it's important. Yeah, so the real question is, okay, so why should we care? And this is just a quick chart, but the truth is, and we've all heard this stat, that millennials they're the predominant generation within the workforce. You can see they're surpassing baby boomers in this slide here.
So by the next year, meaning 2020, 2019, 2021, I mean, as we're looking at numbers, we're seeing significant people in the workforce that are leaving. What's interesting, I am seeing people who are retiring and then coming back because they got bored. But then when they come back, they're no longer in the 30-year job. They're starting out in a different role. And their leadership team, their management team, is a completely different set of generational people than what they had before. And so we're seeing people that struggle with, hey, I went away, I was only gone for 6 months or a year, I come back, this organization is completely different. How things get done is different. How people interact in the organization are definitely different.
It's funny, to your first point, we're seeing a lot of baby boomers really appreciate some of the trends that millennials and young adults have made more predominant. And I don't want to derail to this, but baby boomers are like I'd like to work from home now. You know, why even go in? And, you know, that 8 to 5, that was a grind, you know. 10 to 4 sounds better. Happy hour starts at 4 anyway. So I'll kind of blast through this because I think these are important, but a lot of people really understand the differences. But in the past, a paycheck was enough for your employees. If you're not taking steps now, in addition to just paying your teams, you're going to be left behind. Your young employees, the biggest thing they want is growth and opportunity, as you were just saying. Like, we have to be cognizant of this. In fact, we have to do something about it only if we want the best working for us. If that doesn't matter to you, then ignore this at your own peril. But that's what we're looking at. In the past, too, job security was really important. There was loyalty to companies. Now I hear from young adults all the time, and I'm not exaggerating this. I don't need that job. It was a headache. It was a massive headache. That boss was a jerk. Why invest my precious time into that? And it makes sense at a certain level, but the need for security isn't there. And again, like I just said, now we can, young adults, heck, you're on your devices late at night. We don't work 8 to 5 near as much, nor do we work at the office. We're working at home. We're working in coffee shops, and we're available all times of the day. So this was just about the demonstration of how we are different now than in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to the next, what this is leading to ultimately is 3 big things. And we've seen lack of engagement. Gallup does these surveys in which they find that not only are your employees not engaged with their work and just many times just ready to get out of there, they're actually actively disengaged. So they're detractors from your organization and from your brand. What kind of experiences have you found this to be true, like working with young adults where you've seen this happen to them? I'm curious.
Well, you know, it's interesting, even as I look at the engagement, is that, Advisicon grew for 25 years internationally. We've been doing this, but we didn't have a sales or marketing team. And one of the things that we did about 3 years ago is just sat back and said, look, in the 21st century, things are different. You know, if we want to scale and grow, we want to do things differently, you really need to align your marketing components around that. And again, that's that vision, mission, and values. So even if I'm on a project team, you have a kickoff, we have a charter. We're trying to figure out exactly what are we trying to do, why are we doing it? And so helping them engage in that vision has been extremely helpful. And that's been a lot of fun too, as we look at what is that functionality of what we're trying to accomplish, and then enabling and empowering them to come up with creative solution and ideas. And that doesn't just mean them as only the younger generation, it's all employees.
And I think you're onto it. I mean, the engagement problem is almost always solved by alignment, and that alignment can be created now in different ways, social agreements, like empathy, investing into each other. But I think dealing with the engagement issue has to be a number one priority to keep people over the long term. But the other things that we're seeing moving down is turnover. I mean, turnover is grossly rampant, in especially the technology sector. You're not seeing loyalty to organizations. And even at JinDev, we don't even teach necessarily when we consult. We're not even teaching, hey, you should try to hang on forever and hold them close to you. You should raise them up within, send them off on their way, and maybe they'll come back after their next experience. But you can mitigate turnover in certain industries, and it's really important. You don't want to be turning over a ton like they are in entry-level jobs, retail, customer service. I have a lot of experience in that. And that's where it really can plague you and get really expensive. But turnover is a massive problem now. And finally, punctuality and attendance. I mean, I have an amazing team, but even these things it's just not, work is really not that important on the big scheme of things. Like, let's break it down. And that's the mentality. And not to say it's wrong or right, it definitely impacts us as bosses and leaders, but these are some of the obstacles that we're facing. So to deal with that, what we've really done is built out this curriculum, and this holistic curriculum and training around the 5 pillars, is what we call them, of millennial leadership and management. And essentially, it starts off with understanding who you're dealing with and the foundation, and really getting an idea of the differences and how you can approach them and attack those opportunities. The next thing is the communication. We have to solve the communication piece. I know that everyone, you get my emails, and I know you're running and gunning doing your thing, but I know you respond from time to time. Thank you. But communication, I just released a survey this week asking 10,000 of our list and our people that follow us, what is your biggest, overwhelmingly, the biggest challenge they face? Communication with young adults. Yeah, overwhelmingly the biggest thing. And so those two, foundation and communication, set up they really lay the stage for the rest. Recruiting and hiring, you've got to use technologies, you've got to do it differently these days. The training and onboarding for skills, integrating new processes to do that. I mean, you're the expert in that area, especially with the project management. And finally, the motivating and developing is really all about retention. When you do all these, when you practice all these 5 pillars simultaneously, it gives you the best chance for efficiency and performance with your young adults.
That's great. And what's interesting is whether I'm looking at a project life cycle, we talk about understanding and communication. Some of the key foundational pillars of project management is, what are your requirements? Why are we doing this? And then, communicate. Building your team, we talk about recruiting and hiring, is really finding the right fit on the team. And then once they're in there, empowering them through how you bring them on board and the experience from day one to the end of the project. They're evaluating, right? So you want to train and engage them, and basically said motivate and develop so that you have that succession plan built into not just either a project team, but to even a project department or an organization. And it's fun in a very agile-esque sort of way, is that when they begin to engage, oh my gosh, it is so much fun. It's literally the brainstorming, the creativity, the ideation that gets generated. In many cases, thinking outside the box, and certainly in many cases, a younger generation is much more in tune with some of the technologies that are out there. There's things that are coming out daily, even from Microsoft through Office 365, but yet open source tools, other products that are out there that literally solve problems, and they're on it, just like this. Yeah. So it's great to kind of blend those pillars. I'm glad you put that together. And I just want to make sure, so Wesley, you actually will train people how to go through and engage and do all 5 pillars with some of the things that you do, right?
Yeah, so we do that as our consulting branch. But today, with your permission, and we had a limited time, and this is kind of the last slide that I really wanted to share with you, because it ultimately deals with that communication. You are exactly right. Young adults are brilliant minds. I mean, obviously we're dealing with a very capable, competent generation. But to get to that engagement, it does start with building that rapport. It starts with building that trust, and all that is with the communication, the dialogue that we have. So, with your permission, I posted this online for you and for the Advisicon people that join this webinar. This is a free resource that we have available at our website, and it does give some tools that can immediately help you with your conversations with young adults if you're in a leadership position, and it gives you a framework of the path that you would take when you need to have tough conversations, because those conversations, those one-on-ones, those meaningful times spent together will net you. The outcome will be you being able to ask for more performance, for more dedication, for more loyalty, for working after hours. So this is a free resource for you and the listeners here today that they can get by just going to that URL at the bottom at our website. So, but this was the last thing that I wanted to share with you, and as far as using tools and building empathy and being motivating and sharing your perspective, all the elements on this diagram which can help in communication.
And I think this is kind of where, as we transition into some of the key techniques, we'll talk about tools and techniques, right? The idea of how to get in and really make something work here is how do you apply these? What can you grab and use even today, whether it's with your family, your friends, your project, your team, your organization? These really transcend regardless of what company you work for. So, Wesley, thank you.
You got it.
Let's talk about some of the, in fact, we did go through all the pillars, but we kind of cherry-picked some of the key points that we found that would be very helpful for those of you that are managing teams, working with generational bridges and gaps between staff in your organization, or even at home. These are some things that you could definitely take advantage of. So let's talk about the problem statement. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you guys a little framework, and if you can flip one more slide, I'm going to give you a little framework on thinking about how you could rework your hiring and I don't want to spend a ton on this, but essentially hiring managers are making their decisions for hires within 15 seconds on average. Now that's going to result in poor outcomes. You're not going to hire the best. Yeah, so there you go. In the non-interviewing structure that we see a lot by experienced owners, it's not a great strategy. So what we've done is we've created this framework, and we call it the TPS, because everyone loves the TPS here. But they're theoretical performance scenarios.
Is that like a cover sheet we got to put on
we got
TPS reports, right?
The TPS. We made a whole video on this, it's a takeoff. But essentially what you're doing is when you write your interview questions and build out an interview guide, you need to make sure that you cast a vision, set up a scenario in which a young adult can envision themselves and see themselves in it. So for example, if you were running a bakery and you were hiring young adults to do your labor, then you could essentially say, okay, say we ran out of bread, and there's no supervisor on or bread, people are coming in the front door, what would you do? So in this scenario, you set them up and give them an example of something that you actually face in your company, and then ask them what they would do about that. And this will essentially allow you to get the best indication, along with personality tests, which we advocate, and some of your standard interview techniques, but adding this as an addition to your interviewing to get the best responses, because they know the same old questions. Name your biggest struggle. Where's the time that you were caught, doing this? They've studied the interviews. Young adults know every question you're going to ask before you've done it. So you need to simulate your environment.
Excellent. And I think that's helpful because they will show up and they will have read all the internet questions about what they're doing, what their role is, and really what you want to do is tailor this to your organization.
Yep. And so the next thing to together, and I don't want to, the interview thing has really been helpful for us. I recommend that strategy. The next is really when building rapport, we know that eating together is so important. But there's this mentality, and I think it's probably especially in your industry, where it's like, we're going to eat at our computers, we're grinding. Elon Musk was quoted for saying he wished he didn't have to, eating is a problem for people. What happens when we push eating back, we're finding that our heads are in our cell phones, which is already a problem with young adults, like getting their attention out of unhealthy lifestyles. Obviously, we're not exercising as much. And this culture of overlooking foods and spending time together and actually talking and pushing the cell phone out of the picture or the devices, we found that within companies, if they can do this successfully, they're going to instantly get better performance from their young adults. So we have this little acronym that we put together. When you eat together, spend some time once a week. If you bring your sack lunches to work, eat together, take them outside, whatever. But empathize. As the leader, you can empathize. You need to align during those meetings, and ultimately that's going to build trust. So these are little opportunities that we found that can have big results.
I think this is interesting because if you look at both the technology generations, and as people come in, the Gen Y, Gen Z, Gen X, everyone's on their phone, but what ends up happening is they lose that meaningful communication, right? How are you doing? I'm fine. No. It's not just on a text. I can't find it on Facebook. You really can dig deeper. And as we know, it's about how things get done is through relationships, right? People work with those they want to work with. They want to do a job that they like doing. You get hired, in many cases, by decisions are based upon what people like or if people like you. And so the ability to create a meaningful relationship, and sometimes is to step outside. I've kind of taken an approach here, which is if I'm ever going to try and eat out, I'm going to take somebody with me. Yeah. Because it's an opportunity that says, look, I've got some downtime. Maybe I'm away from the office. I'm out of the environment. But I'm really zeroing in on the relationship piece, because not only do we care, but the idea is that you can bond and you can really bring up or surface or resolve problems. You actually create a safety net within your team, your project team, your work team that just says it's not just about, checking a box. Did I turn in my TPS, cover sheet on my report? Did I fill out my project server timesheet, send it in? Did I update my project schedule? Is SharePoint dashboard up to date? No, it's really about, hey, something's going on here. I can actually engage deeper. And I love the acronym EAT. So Wesley, anything on Eat Together? I think you defined it. Emphasize, align, and trust, right?
That's it. You know, what's interesting, and sometimes I get a little pushback because I do a lot of these trainings and people are like, yeah, I got it, Wesley. Eat together. Great. Yes, ask good interview questions. The truth, though, is those are the secret sauce. Like, that is what converts meaningful leadership into team action. And so for those people that listen to me and they kind of poo-poo some of these things, like I get it. And yes, some of the concepts are conceptually simple. But this is the secret sauce. And leadership is essentially investing into others, but it's going to net. The net result is so much more. So yeah, that was it.
Absolutely. And again, around that meaningful conversation is that you can actually get past some of the surface conversations, surface activities, and engage at a different level to whether solve things that are relational, that are technical, and really thinking through that. So whether you take time off, you have, off-sites, or you're able to, grab just some quiet time and eat together is helpful. But more importantly, as we begin to look at that interview, even if it's a situational interview, it helps to frame the concept of what someone will walk into so that there isn't suddenly, hey, I'm coming in here to do a business analyst type function. It's, okay, well, in my mind, I know what a business analyst does. It's, no, what is actually happens here? And that is just as important, not just so much even the salary anymore. It's where am I going? Why am I doing it? What are we trying to accomplish? Again, that's that meaningful conversation. It digs in deeper. And as you begin to really start having that, even from the first time you interview, or if you're building a project team, figure out who's going to be on that team. These are areas that you can figure out how best to leverage those you work with.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I know we're winding down the last few sessions here, so let me take us out here. Wesley, I think you've got online training. I know that I've sat through some of these, and they're great. They're actually fun to listen to. But anything before we take any questions from our audience?
No, that was it. So it's JinDev.co, and yeah, thanks for having me. I love talking this stuff. It's funny, going through these slides, there's so much more to share, and we'll have to do it again, but thanks for the invite.
Oh, you bet. So, Amanda, do we have any posted questions? I'm not looking at the question window here. I think I've got the video window open, but anything that's posted now?
We do, but it seems that we've run over our time. So the main request in here is that we share that resource that was mentioned earlier, the link.
Yep, I will answer those in the chat box, but it's jindev.co/get.
Here it is. I brought up the slide there. There it is. www.jindev.co/get. There, excellent. And by the way, if you do have more questions, if you have questions or you just want to reach out, I really encourage you to contact Wesley directly. He's an amazing guy. He's got an amazing story in terms of some of the creativity that he has. I call him like the serial entrepreneur. And I still think, Wesley, that it is the axe-throwing pub and eatery that's really going to be the winning project that you'll do. But you really have hit the nail on the head, and it's something that we see every day as we look at either onboarding, growing, or running teams, is really how to communicate across the generational divide. So Amanda, just to make sure that we are wrapping up timely for everyone here, let me turn this back over to you.
Great, thanks guys. And thank you everyone for attending our webinar today. We welcome your questions and your feedback, and for more information, you can email us at contact@advisicon.com. Once you exit today's webinar, you will receive a survey on this presentation, and you will need to complete and submit the survey in order to receive your PDUs. From there, you will receive a follow-up email within 2 business days with your PDU information. If you're watching this recording on YouTube or another social media platform, please be sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any future uploads. And on behalf of Advisicon, JinDev, and myself, we thank you for joining us today and hope to see you participate in our future webinars. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.